The Magic Nanny, Volume 1, Saying Hello, by Emily O'Brien. Chapter 1, Meeting the Family. Our story begins in the midsummer at the beautiful countryside of Cheshire. On top of the green grass hill stands a single white family home with 3 bedrooms, a kitchen and a dining hall, all in one room, but enough for a family to fit in. Living there was a mother named Kathy and her loving husband named Brian. Kathy is a 39-year-old, kind, loving mother with long, light brown, straight hair reaching down to her back, dark blue eyes and lips shaped like a blossom in pink. She's a kind person but is also a little strict, but for all the right reasons, and is a very hard worker. Brian is a kind-hearted and a funny 41-year-old caring father. He's sometimes mischievous, but he knows not to take things too far. He has a good sense of humour, with hair coloured in chestnut and shaped as natural wave, but short by his neck, with blue eyes and red lips. Kathy and Brian were made for each other. They first met in college and fell in love, and got married 10 years later. They longed to have a family of their own, but after months of trying and after a lot of testing, it soon turned out they were unable to have children of their own. Kathy was devastated, but Brian never wanted to give up and knew there was only one more option that they can try. That was called adoption. Before they knew it, Kathy and Brian adopted 5 beautiful children. The first child they adopted was Blake, a 12-year-old aggressive and rude but caring boy, with dark brown generic short hair, dark brown eyes, lips like a small heart in pink. He's very bossy and doesn't seem to care about life, but inside he feels broken and doesn't know how to express himself in a healthy way. When Blake was 3 years old, his father left and his mother became very ill. With no family to look after him, Blake was sent to a children's home and remained in care for years. Most of his time, he'd sit by a windowsill in a room with walls all navy blue and gloomy, waiting and hoping for his mother to come back. Sadly, she never did, but his life changed when he was 7 years old. Kathy found him in a dark and gloomy room, looking so unhappy, and felt sorry for him. At first, Blake didn't approve of her, but the moment he met Brian, his brown eyes lightened up like a light bulb. Blake loved Brian and his sense of humour. For example, squirting Kathy with a water pistol and having ice cream when they shouldn't. And the more time they spent, Kathy and Brian knew that Blake was the right child to adopt. After many visits and inspections, Blake settled into his new home and was happy. However, this was just the beginning. Their second child is Lucy, a mature and feisty 10-year-old with short, straight blonde hair, bright blue eyes and small heart lips in red. She's a little bossy, but in a good way, and enjoys trying new things. She's the older girl in the family and has a strong determination. Lucy was raised by her grandparents until the age of 6. Her grandpa got sick and was in and out of hospital several times, and her grandmother struggled to look after her. Things took a turn for the worse when her grandpa passed away so suddenly, and her grandma's heart couldn't take it, so she placed Lucy in a children's home. It was a tough start, but she learnt how to grow up and take care of herself. The moment Lucy met Kathy and Brian was when they spotted her in the kitchen doing the washing up. They loved how mature she was and was very polite. Even Blake liked how nice she was and knew she was the perfect match. The third child is Justin, a very kind and caring 9-year-old with light brown short and shaggy hair, eyes brown like hazel and red medium heart lips. He's very polite and has a strong mind. Justin was abandoned as a baby and grew up in a children's home. He never knew his real parents and never knew what it felt like to be with a family. But that moment changed when Kathy and Brian read about him in his logbook and felt that they had to give him a home. Blake and Lucy also felt sorry for him, and they couldn't resist taking him home. Justin never felt so happy. The moment he was adopted, the more he felt he was at home. Finally, we come to not one, but two of Kathy's and Brian's children. There are twin girls named Daisy and Stephanie. Daisy is a very bossy 6-year-old girly girl with long straight golden hair, blue eyes like the sea, and red small heart lips. She's very talkative and very sassy, and sometimes she says things before she thinks. Unlike her twin sister Stephanie, is the same image as her, same long golden hair, blue eyes, and same red lips like a small heart. Even though they look alike, Stephanie is very different. She's very shy and doesn't talk a lot, but has a gentle heart. She's very close with Daisy, and they never want to be apart. Daisy and Stephanie were raised by a single mother, but when they were 2 years old, their mother struggled and couldn't take proper care of them. So again, they were placed in a children's home. It was a big surprise for the family because they were only looking for one more child, and Lucy was desperate for a sister. It happened when Lucy went for a wander in the room with little toddlers. The walls were filled with bright blue paint and a big rainbow. Lucy looked down and spotted little Daisy walking up to her with her bright blue eyes and giving her a little smile. Lucy smiled too and thought how sweet. She spent more time with little Daisy by making her laugh and not keeping their eyes off each other. And when Kathy and Brian found her, they couldn't believe their eyes. Lucy fell in love with Daisy and knew she was the perfect match. Kathy smiled and thought how sweet, and the others agreed too. But then they got some unexpected news. The family met Daisy's twin sister Stephanie and were amazed how they looked exactly alike. It was a difficult choice to make, but they knew it would be very wrong to separate them, and Lucy didn't want to leave Daisy. So they decided to keep both of them, and now their family was complete. They may seem like the perfect family, but it suddenly changed. 2 years ago, Kathy became a single parent to her children after her husband Brian moved to Australia for a better job. Kathy didn't want to move to the other side of the world, and neither did the children. Their home was their home, and they were happy. They argued, and it became unhealthy for the children. It soon came to the fact that Kathy had to let Brian go and raise the children alone. At first, she thought it'd be a piece of cake, but it turned out to be the worst choice she ever made. Since Brian left, the children's behaviour went from good to bad. Blake went from a happy child to an angry child. Most of the time, he'd argue with Kathy and take his anger out on everyone else. Soon, the rest of the children felt angry and blamed each other. The more they argued, the more they were falling apart. Kathy tried her best to control her children, but found it very difficult. As well as trying to find a job, finding the right school, trying to ground them and talking to them about how bad their behaviour has been, nothing helped and nothing seemed to change. One night, Kathy couldn't sleep. She sat on her red Chesterfield sofa, wearing her pink pyjama top and lilac velvet trousers, while holding her cup of tea. She felt so miserable since Brian left, and with the children's behaviour getting worse, she didn't know what to do. She did have one thought, but it wasn't a nice thought. It was a thought she would never dreamed of happening. Kathy started thinking if she should send her children back into care. No matter how hard she tried to raise her children on her own, things weren't getting better. If she did send them back, she can go to Australia and reunite with Brian again. But before she knew it, Kathy realised how horrid she was being. "What am I thinking?" she asked herself in surprise. "I can't send my kids away. They're a part of me." Kathy felt very guilty and decided to check on the children. She slowly walked up the wooden stairs without making a creaking sound and slowly opened the door to the boys' bedroom. Blake and Justin had their own bedroom. The walls were dark blue like the night sky, filled with different planets and rockets. They had a light blue wooden wardrobe to keep their clothes and shoes in, and a brown wooden drawer to keep their toys inside. Blake and Justin sleep in bunk beds. Blake has the bottom bunk, and Justin has the top bunk. Kathy gently walked inside to check on them, making sure they were sleeping okay. She gently bent her knees and smiled as she reached her arm out to stroke Blake's hair. Then she stood up to stroke Justin's hair and kissed his cheek. And she quietly walked out of the room and closed the door. Then she went to the girls' bedroom. Lucy, Daisy and Stephanie also share a room. Daisy and Stephanie also have a bunk bed, and Lucy has a bed of her own. The bedroom walls were bright pink, filled with purple flowers and white unicorns, along with a white wardrobe and white dresser. Kathy smiled as she watched them sleep. She couldn't bear to send them back to a children's home. She raised them, and are now a part of her life. Her only option was to find someone who can help look after her children while she's at work, and someone who can clean and cook and become a perfect role model. She could ask her parents to help out, but they live in the south of Guildford, and it's very far away from Cheshire. Kathy didn't have many friends, and most of them have left and moved on with their lives. There was only one person who might be able to help, and that was to find a nanny who would cook and clean, a nanny who's kind and loving, a nanny who would look after the children while she works. Chapter 2. Finding the right nanny. The next morning, Kathy called the children down into the sitting room for a family meeting. The children walked down the stairs together, still feeling a little confused, as they've never had one before, so it must be serious. Blake, however, rolled his eyes as he came down the stairs and didn't see the point. The children sat on the sofa, and Kathy was ready to share her announcement. "Are you ready to know why I called you down here?" "Because you told us to," Daisy replied with a sassy tone. Kathy smiled a little. She loved Daisy being all sassy and bossy, but there was no time for that. So she decided to get straight to the point. "I need to go back to work soon, and you need to go back to school." The children sighed in disbelief and gave a massive frown. They didn't want to go back to school. They hated school. Kathy struggled a lot with money, that she couldn't afford to keep them in their local school, so she had to take them out and haven't returned since, which is a major problem. However, school was the last thing on Kathy's mind. "I've decided to hire a nanny who can cook, clean and look after you all while I start working," she said. The children looked at each other in surprise. Justin thought that was a great idea. Lucy thought they could do with some extra help. The twins thought it'd be a good idea too, as long as it was someone nice. Blake, however, didn't see the point and didn't like the idea. He believed he was old enough to take care of his younger siblings. "Blake, sweetheart," Kathy said, placing her arm around him, "you don't cook or clean or look after your siblings." Blake rolled his eyes and folded his arms. If only he knew he could do it, it wouldn't be a problem. Stephanie wondered if Kathy will bring home a nice nanny like Mary Poppins. Kathy smiled and explained that she will find the perfect nanny, a nanny that will be just right for her and the children, a nanny that will make them smile, laugh and be happy again. The children looked at each other and wondered if this will be a good thing. They haven't been a close family in such a long time, so this could be a good thing to happen. Even though Blake was against the idea, he felt he had no choice but to go for it. A few weeks went by, and Kathy and the children met a lot of people who were after the job. A lot of standing in line, shaking hands, introduction, and lots of questions. However, neither of them were good enough. One nanny was able to cook, but never liked to clean. And another nanny was able to clean, but has never cooked. Some nannies looked like the Wicked Witch of the West, and some didn't like children. Kathy couldn't understand why these people would take up the job if they're not experienced or don't like children. No matter how hard she tried not to give up, things just went from bad to worse for the family. Kathy couldn't find a right nanny, and the children's behaviour became more out of control. One evening, the rain poured like cats and dogs, and the children just finished their tea and wanted a biscuit. In the kitchen, There was a jar on the kitchen counter, and inside was only one biscuit. Blake took that one biscuit and didn't share it with everyone. The children's blood boiled, their eyebrows changed to anger, their faces turned red with rage. They were so angry at Blake that they started a fight. Blake reached his hand up as high as he could with the biscuit in his hand. Lucy pushed him to the ground, and Justin tried to grab the biscuit. Daisy tried to pull Lucy out of the way, but Lucy pushed her back and started to fight. Stephanie started yelling, but it seemed like no one could hear her, so she yelled even louder. It wasn't long until Kathy overheard the screaming. She sat on the sofa in the sitting room, placing her hands over her face in disbelief. "Oh no, not again!" she cried. She felt angry, hopeless, and not fit to be a mother anymore. She couldn't take much more of the fight, the tantrums and the shouting. Just then, she quickly got up from the sofa and stomped her way into the kitchen, trying her best to break up the fight. But it was 5 against 1, and she couldn't win. Kathy was so stressed out, she couldn't take much more. She had no job, no money, no husband, no nanny to care for, and her children were so out of control that enough was enough. Kathy walked back to the sitting room and slammed the door. She leaned her head back with eyes filling up with tears. No matter how hard she tried, nothing seemed to get better. She felt that she had no choice but to phone up social services and send her children away again. She knew it was a horrible thing to do, and no matter how much she tried to brush it off her mind or talk some sense into herself, it was her only option. Her blue eyes slowly filled with tears, but hardly ran down her face. So she slowly got up, on her feet, and walked to the telephone. But as she went to reach the phone, there was a knock on the door. Kathy quickly turned her head and gasped. It was the evening. Nobody comes knocking at her door at this time. Kathy felt puzzled and thought, who had been knocking at this time? There was no doorknob on the white wooden door, so she couldn't look through. She held onto the silver door handle, gently pushed it down, and opened the door. Chapter 3. My name is Ava May. The minute Kathy opened the door, there stood an African-looking lady with short black curly hair, dark brown eyes, dark red lips in the shape of a round heart, wearing a black dress with a white apron, a white hat, and white parasol umbrella. She smiled at Kathy with kindness. "Good evening," the lady said. "You must be Kathy Hills." Kathy nodded her head in surprise. She had no idea who this lady was or why she came knocking at this time of night. "My name is Ava May," the lady said. "I believe you're in need of a nanny." Kathy smiled politely, but after many failed attempts of finding the right person, she didn't think Ava May was the right choice, especially with what she was wearing. Ava May could see the stress and confusion in Kathy's eyes and can tell that she really needed a helping hand. "Don't worry," she said. "I'm a professional nanny with many years of skilled cooking, cleaning and looking after children." Kathy smiled a little, and the more Ava May spoke about her hard-working skills, Kathy began to see a different side to her. Then she thought she must be even better than all the other nannies that she met. So she smiled and allowed Ava May inside her house. The moment Ava May walked inside, the first thing she heard was the children shouting, and the first thing she saw was a lot of clothes and toys on the floor. Kathy felt very embarrassed, as she didn't have time to clean up, but Ava May didn't mind at all. Kathy allowed Ava May to sit on the sofa and make herself at home, while she gets the children and introduces them to her. Ava May smiled and sat down. Kathy went inside the kitchen, and the children were still fighting, so she took a deep breath. "Quiet!" she shouted. Her voice was so loud that the children froze and looked at her. Kathy folded her arms and stared at her children like a strict teacher. The children put their heads down, knowing they're in serious trouble, But that wasn't why Kathy had to break up the fight. "We've got another nanny in the house," she said, "so I want you all to come and meet her and be polite." The children sighed. They didn't want to meet another nanny and shake hands again. They knew this would be another waste of time. So they walked into the sitting room with faces like thunder. The second they looked at her, the children were surprised. They'd never seen a nanny dressed up like a proper nanny. But then they started thinking that she was another horrible lady who liked to dress up and doesn't like children at all. They knew that she wouldn't be perfect. Kathy introduced Blake, Lucy, Justin, and the twins, Daisy and Stephanie, to her. Ava May smiled and was very delighted to meet them. But then her smile slowly turned upside down. Never in her life has she ever met any children with sad and grumpy faces on their first meeting. But Ava May is so kind and hardly ever cross. She didn't want to start the greeting in a bad way. "Good evening, children," she said politely. "Hi," the children said, but very quietly. Still, their faces were not happy, and Ava May wasn't expecting a reply like that. She was hoping for a more friendly way to say hello, and looking at how stressed and embarrassed Kathy felt, she came up with an amazing idea. "Mrs. Hills," she said to Kathy, "you go make yourself a nice cup of tea while I spend some time with the children alone." Kathy's eyes lightened up like a light bulb. Never in so many years has anyone told her to have time to herself before or look after her children alone. Ava May decided to take the children upstairs. "Come along, children," Ava May said as she walked out of the sitting room. "We have lots to learn before bedtime." The children felt puzzled. They knew how to greet people, so why should they go with a lady they've never met before and be taught a lesson about greeting? Upstairs in the girls' bedroom, Ava May stood the children in line from oldest to youngest and suggested that they should start again with their greetings and get to know one another. The children looked at each other, thinking this is going to be a waste of time, as they don't want her in the house. Just then, Ava May walked up to Blake and reached her hand out for a shake. "How do you do, Blake?" she said. "My name is Ava May." Blake rolled his eyes and unfolded his arms and angrily looked at her as he shook her hand. He didn't smile and shook her hand as if he couldn't care less. Ava May was not impressed. "I think you should smile and shake my hand a lot more gentle," she said calmly. But Blake didn't care. He was still in a bad mood. Next, Ava May came to shake Lucy's hand. Her greeting was a lot better. She smiled brightly and shook her hand very gently. Even though Ava May looked very different to all the other nannies, Lucy had to ask her a question. "Why do you have a fancy umbrella?" she asked, pointing at Ava May's umbrella in her hand. "Maybe because she's Mary Poppins," Daisy cried, barging into the conversation. Ava May laughed a little and thought that was very sweet of her to say so, but she also mentioned that it's very rude to interrupt when two people are talking, especially when saying hello. Daisy's cheeks turned red. She didn't mean to interrupt and felt a little embarrassed. Then Ava May went to shake Justin's hand. "Pleased to meet you, Ava May," Justin said with a smile. Ava May couldn't believe it. Justin shook her hand like a true gentleman, with a smile so nice and bright, while Blake and Lucy had a face like a grumpy grey cloud. "Now you have very good manners," she said with a smile on her face. Justin smiled and felt good. He didn't feel so angry anymore. Then Ava May came to shake Daisy's hand. Daisy smiled a little and didn't say anything. She didn't want to be rude and interrupt like before, but Ava May didn't mind. And then she went to shake Stephanie's hand. Even though Stephanie was the quiet one, she couldn't resist on having something to say. "You have a very pretty name, Ava May," she said. Ava May smiled and thought that was a very nice thing to say. Daisy and Stephanie smiled at each other. Even they were beginning to see a different side to her. "My goodness," said Ava May, "there are so many names." The children began to giggle. They didn't feel angry or upset anymore. Ava May seemed to be very different, and it was about to get even more exciting as she had an idea. "How would you children like to go on a trip?" she asked. They looked at each other, wondering if they would be allowed to. Even though it was nearly bedtime and still light outside, they were never allowed to go outside past 7 o'clock at night. But Ava May wasn't worried. She had a better way of making this trip happen without leaving the house. First, she got the children to stand in a circle, and while they did that, the children felt excited. Apart from Blake, of course. He didn't understand why they had to stand in a circle. He thought this must be a make-believe game and didn't seem to care. They stood in a circle for some time, but nothing was happening. "Is something supposed to happen?" asked Justin. "We need to close our eyes and count to 3, Ava May replied. So the children closed their eyes and slowly counted to 3. When they opened their eyes, they looked around. The walls were still pink, the beds and wardrobe were still in the same place. They were still in the bedroom. "Oh no," said Ava May, "I must have forgotten something." Then she gently lifted her left arm and waved her hand from side to side. Just then, a tiny bit of sparkle appeared in her hand and began glowing. Before they knew it, the magic sparkle sprinkled around the room. The children's eyes widened in surprise. They've never seen anything like it before. Before they knew it, they weren't in the bedroom anymore. Chapter 4. She's a Magic Nanny. Ava May and the children magically appeared to a place where the ground was full of green grass and the sky bright blue. It was a massive field with no houses or trees, and the grass was covered in gold sparkle. The children looked around in surprise, wondering where they were. Blake couldn't believe his eyes. He tried rubbing them into thinking this was imaginary, but it wasn't imaginary. "How did you do that?" he asked in surprise. Ava May smiled and kept quiet. That made the children realise that Ava May wasn't just an ordinary nanny or a well-skilled nanny. She is a magic nanny. She used her magic to transfer them all to the magic field where no one has ever gone before. It looked like a perfect place to play, but that was not the reason why Ava May brought them here. "Now this is the perfect place to help us all get to know each other," she said. The children shook their heads. They already knew each other, and they discovered that Ava May is a magic nanny. The only problem was Ava May didn't know the children very well, so she came up with a really good game. One by one, she got the children to say their name. Blake was the first to say his name, Lucy was second, Justin was third, Daisy was fourth, and Stephanie was the last. Then Ava May wanted them to say their name louder. Blake and Daisy were the loudest to say their name. Lucy and Justin were good too, but Stephanie found it hard to say her name as loud as she could. But Ava May didn't mind. After that, she made the children do a big jump while saying their name. Blake did a big jump and everyone smiled. This game turned out to be quite fun. Lucy decided not to jump as high, but do a little jump while saying her name, which made them laugh. Justin did a big jump with his hands in the air. He felt like flying. Daisy did the same too and shouted her name as loudly as she could. Then when it was Stephanie's turn, she jumped and amazingly said her name loud and clear. Everyone laughed. That was a brilliant game, they thought, and Ava May was happy because now she knows all the children's names, but she had so much more to say. "Now that I know all your names, I think it's time we learned how to greet each other," she said. Justin wanted to know why greeting people is important. Ava May explained that when you meet someone for the first time and greet them with kindness, it shows respect and helps us to connect with each other and become good friends. That gave Daisy and Stephanie an idea. Daisy decided to say hello to Stephanie, and Stephanie said hello to Daisy. Then they both shook hands and hugged each other. That made Ava May and the others laugh, but found it very cute at the same time. Just then, Ava May had another idea. "I think we need to learn another way of greeting," she said. "There are more different ways to greet people instead of saying hello?" asked Stephanie. Ava May agreed and explained that there are many different ways for people to say hello. For example, Some people say hello in different languages. People curtsy or bow to royalty, and some use sign language to greet people who can't hear. What's sign language? Asked Justin. When people use their hands to talk, Ava May replied. Lucy remembered a boy in a children's home who used sign language and learnt a little. Wow, Ava May said excitedly. We have an expert. That made the children laugh again. They laughed so many times that they didn't feel angry anymore. They began to feel happy. Ava May began to see a softer side to the children and felt very pleased. Soon, it was time for the children to get into another circle and teach them a different type of greet. Are we going home? Asked Daisy. No, darling, said Ava May. We're off to see the Queen. The children gasped excitedly. They've never met a queen before, or even visited a castle. But before they could set off, Ava May decided to teach the girls on how to curtsy and the boys to bow their heads. Chapter 5. Greeting the Queen. It took some time and effort for the children to learn how to bow and curtsy, but with help from Ava May, they soon learned how to do it properly. The boys learned how to gently reach the Queen's hand to shake by not reaching too far or too fast, just very gently, and to slowly bow their heads, but not too far down, just a little bow and look up and smile. Blake found it very hard and never knew how difficult this was going to be, and it was hard to stand up straight and with his shoulders back. Justin, on the other hand, found it very simple and learnt very quickly. Then she taught the girls how to curtsy by putting one leg behind the other and gently bend their knees, not too quick or too lower down, and must keep their head up high and smile. Lucy was very good with her curtsies, but Daisy and Stephanie were not quite so good. Daisy kept losing her balance and looking down, whereas Stephanie is so shy she couldn't keep her head up or look into the eyes. But Ava May didn't give up, and the children found it quite fun. With a lot of practice and standing up straight, the children managed to get it all right, and it was time for them to get into another circle. Now remember, Ava May said, raising her finger, you must stay very calm and smile and be polite. The children nodded their heads and understood. They all took a deep breath and stayed calm. So they counted to 3, and Ava May raised her arm, and with the magic sparkle spreading around them, they were no longer at the field. They appeared by a wooden drawbridge that led to a big castle filled with clear blue water. Even more exciting, the children's clothes have changed. Blake wasn't wearing his navy blue jumper and black jeans and grey sneakers, and Justin wasn't wearing his green shirt or blue jeans or his white sneakers. They both wore a black tuxedo with black leather shoes. Lucy's purple t-shirt and lilac satin skirt changed into a purple ball gown, and her white sneakers changed into sparkly silver dolly shoes. Daisy's pink flowery summer dress and pink jelly shoes changed into a bright pink ball gown with silver sandals. Stephanie's blue flowery summer dress and blue jelly shoes changed into a light blue ball gown, also with silver sandals. Look, cried Lucy, our clothes have changed. They all couldn't believe it. The girls twirled around and felt like little princesses, and the boys felt like gentlemen. But there was no time to admire or dance around, because the Queen was on her way. So the children stood still. Their heads were up high and their shoulders were back. Just then, the wooden door slowly opened, and Ava May and the children watched. Out came a lady wearing a white formal dress with a blue satin sash, a beige handbag and white gloves. Her hair was white and short like a bowl haircut, and blue eyes with glasses, and lips red shaped like a full heart, and a golden crown on her head. The children couldn't believe their eyes. It was the Queen, gently walking down the drawbridge. The children smiled excitedly. It was their very first time meeting her. The Queen walked up to Ava May, so she took her hand and gently curtsied. "Good evening, Your Majesty," she said in a polite tone. The Queen smiled in delight, and Ava May introduced her to the children. Blake was the first to shake the Queen's hand. He gently took her hand, carefully gave a shake, and bowed his head. "Delighted to meet you, Your Majesty," he said. The Queen smiled, and then she went to shake Lucy's hand. She smiled politely and gently placed one leg behind the other and bent her knees to curtsy. "Pleasure to meet you, Your Majesty," she said. The Queen felt very impressed, and it got even better when she got to shake Justin's hand. He bowed his head and gave a lovely smile. The Queen couldn't believe how polite they were. Even when she shook Daisy's hand, she kept quiet and not too excited, and was able to curtsy properly. And Stephanie managed to keep eye contact with the Queen and gently curtsy. Soon the greeting was over and went really well. "My goodness," said the Queen, "what lovely children!" And she walked away, feeling very pleased. Ava May smiled at the children, and they smiled back. They felt so proud that they made the Queen happy. "I hope you know now why greeting people is very important," she said. The children began to understand. They realised it was to show kindness and respect and to be liked for who they are as people. "So people won't like us if we don't say hello?" asked Blake. "Exactly," Ava May replied, giving a big nod. Then she explained that when you meet someone and not greet them with kindness, it can be very rude and disrespectful. Justin then remembered the time when they all first met in foster care. By saying hello, and they got along so well with each other, they became a big family. Lucy, on the other hand, didn't seem to agree. "But we do fight a lot," she said while lowering her eyes in sadness. The children began to realise that she was right. They have been fighting a lot lately, by screaming at each other, pushing and hurting one another. But since they've been learning about greeting and going on a journey with a magic nanny, they haven't had a fight since. Ava May had a thought. She encouraged the children to say their hellos properly and make it up together. So the children greeted each other with kindness by shaking hands, bowing their heads, and even curtsying. It made them laugh even better. They felt very happy to have each other, not just as friends, but as brothers and sisters. They enjoyed themselves so much, they didn't want to come home just yet. "Can you take us to another place to greet people?" asked Daisy. Ava May had a little think about it. It was nearly time to go home, but she saw a happier side to the children and she wanted to carry on, so she agreed to take them to see one more place. The children smiled excitedly, so they got into a circle, and as they liked each other again, they held on to each other's hands, while Ava May raised her arm again and the magic sparkle swished them around, disappearing from the castle. Chapter 6. Becoming Friends. With a little magic sparkle, Ava May and the children safely appeared in the city of Cheshire. There were loads of adults walking and meeting up with their friends. They all said hello with hugs, kisses, handshaking and waving at each other. "Everybody's saying hello to other people," said Stephanie. "That's because they know each other and are friends," said Ava May. The children watched a young lady waving at another lady with a smile, and they began to hug each other. Then they saw a man walking up to another guy, and they both shook hands and hugged. Then they saw a happy couple, a beautiful lady walking up to a man, and they kissed each other on the lips and hugged. That made the children smile. It was so nice to see people smiling and greeting to other people. "So it really is important to say hello," said Blake. Ava May agreed and reminded them of the time when the children first met her. The children thought back and remembered that very moment. Ava May was nice and different. The children, however, didn't see it at the time, and they were rude and unhappy. But after discovering the fact that she's a magic nanny and taught them so much, they realised that she's a lot more than what they thought. A good listener, kind-hearted, caring, understanding, and best of all, she made them smile and feel happy again. They all looked at her with a smile, knowing that she's the most amazing nanny they've ever met, and not just to do with magic. Daisy couldn't resist to give her a big hug. "You're the best, Ava May," she said. Stephanie didn't feel so shy anymore, and she, of course, couldn't resist on giving Ava May a hug. Justin smiled happily. He felt glad that she came and teach them how to greet, so he came and gave her a hug too. "I've never learnt so much about greeting since I met you," he said. Ava May thought that was very sweet of him to say. Lucy never felt so happy and calm in such a long time, so she ran and gave her the biggest hug. Blake, on the other hand, he didn't feel like giving Ava May a hug. Even though he was happy and didn't feel angry anymore, he still felt a bit unsure. But he reached his hand out for a shake. Ava May smiled and reached her hand too. They both shook hands with pride, and Blake smiled and nodded his head, knowing that Ava May is a good person and a very nice friend. With all the meet and greets they've learned, Ava May raised her hand and the magic sparkle swished them around one more time. Chapter 7. Home Again. Before they knew it, Ava May and the children arrived back in the bedroom, back with the pink walls and purple flowers and white unicorns, with the bunk beds and pink dresser and wardrobe. "We're back home again," Stephanie said in surprise. Ava May nodded her head. It was good to be home after their magical adventure. But Ava May wanted the children to come closer to her. So they all huddled together, and Ava May wanted the children to make a promise. "I want you all to keep my magic a secret," she said. The children looked at each other and wondered why. They were no good at keeping secrets, and they really wanted to tell Kathy. But Ava May explained that revealing her secret to everyone would make her lose all her magic. The children were horrified. Of course they didn't want Ava May to lose her magic, or no longer go on another magical adventure again. They all took a deep breath and realised that for Ava May to keep her magic at all times, they will have to keep this a secret. So they all placed their hands on top of each other's, and Ava May made a plea to the children that whatever happens, nobody must ever know her secret. They agreed and lifted their arms up in the air and cheered. They had so much fun learning about meet and greet that they decided to play pretend on their magical adventure. The boys bowed their heads and the girls pretended to be the queen. Ava May watched them and was very happy to see them playing and not fighting. Just then, the door slowly opened. It was Kathy. She slowly walked inside and couldn't believe what she was seeing. It was her children playing together, laughing together, and not screaming or shouting at one another. Ava May turned to face the door and couldn't believe her eyes. "Oh, Mrs. Hills," she said in a startled tone. "I'm so sorry if we were making too much noise." Kathy laughed and shook her head, telling her it was no big deal. She didn't hear a thing and was so surprised seeing her children happy. She didn't know what to say. The children looked at Kathy and gave her a big happy smile. It was a smile that Kathy had not seen in the children for such a long time. How on earth did one person keep them so quiet and make them this happy in such a short space of time, she thought. Just then, Daisy ran up to her and pleaded for Ava May to stay and be the nanny. "She's the best thing we've ever had," Justin said excitedly. Kathy was amazed. Of all the nannies that she's met and interviewed, she never expected the children to like this one. Before she could decide, Kathy wanted to have a talk with her in private. Ava May smiled and agreed. So they went out of the bedroom, leaving the children to carry on playing the game together. Kathy and Ava May walked down the stairs and into the kitchen to have a talk. She still couldn't believe how Ava May kept them so quiet for some time. For a few minutes, she thought the house was empty. Ava May laughed a little and explained that she's a professional nanny and has over 15 years of experience helping families in distress and making the children be happy again. Kathy was so thankful and glad that she came, even though it was unexpected and kind of late at night. And after all that, she was sure that Ava May could do with a cup of tea. "I'll put the kettle on," she said. As Kathy stood up, Ava May got up and placed her hands on her shoulder. "No, you sit down and I'll make the tea," she said. Kathy thought that was very nice of her, but she didn't need to make her the tea. But Ava May insisted. Kathy smiled, and as she watched her making the tea, she then thought that Ava May might just be the right choice after all. "I've never seen my children so happy together," she said. Ava May smiled, and as she started making the tea, Kathy opened up to her about how hard it's been for her and the children, with her husband Brian leaving to work abroad and the effect it had on the others. Ava May understood how she felt. It is very hard to be a single parent, especially with adopted children. You want to give them a perfect life and a home, but a slight change can have a big effect. And the second she heard there was a mother in desperate need of a nanny, she knew she had to come as soon as possible. Kathy felt good talking to someone about how she felt and realised that if Ava May didn't knock on the door, she would have made the biggest mistake of her life. Just then, the tea was ready. Kathy looked down on the table and noticed the white teacup was in front of her. Kathy looked at Ava May in surprise. "How did you do it so quickly?" she asked excitedly. "I'm a very fast learner," Ava May said with a wink. Kathy laughed, and as Ava May sat down with her, she knew that Ava May was the right nanny to have. So without any second thoughts, Kathy reached her hand out to Ava May. "I would love for you to come and be our nanny," she said with a smile. Ava May was delighted and happily accepted her role, so they both raised their teacups together and made a toast to a new start. After that, Ava May went back upstairs to tell the children the good news. When Ava May opened the door, the children's faces lit up. Ava May pulled up a sad face, which made them worry. "Children," she said, "I've got to go." Before she could finish her sentence, the children looked at each other with worried faces. They didn't want her to go. They wanted her to stay. They pleaded and begged. "Please don't go," they cried. Ava May smiled and explained that she has to go and collect her things because she is staying. The children's eyes widened with excitement. Their mouths opened so widely they couldn't believe it. It was the best news they've ever heard. The children jumped for joy and cheered, but before Ava May could leave, there was one more thing she wanted to do. "I think we should greet each other just one more time," she said. The children smiled and knew exactly how to do it. So they lined up together from oldest to youngest, and one by one, Ava May shook their hands with a smile, and the children greeted her with kindness, respect, and with a smile. It was the best greeting that Ava May ever had with the children, and as they were so good, Justin wanted to ask another question. "Can we have another magical adventure tomorrow?" he asked politely. Ava May really wanted to, but it was time for bed. But as long as the children kept their secret, they might be able to have another magical adventure very soon.